Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Download Today, where we give you discussion and Catholic analysis from the all-important Catholic perspective. Today is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. I'm Michael Voris here with two co-hosts, good guys. Well, at least one of them's a good guy. Simon and what's your name? Brad, Eli, our host today.
It's the first time I've been described as a good guy by somebody other than my mother.
Yeah, well, that's right. Joining us today also is our guest host. We put him in the fourth seat and call it the guest host seat, Kyle Copey. Hi, Kyle.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Kyle, very quickly, in 1 second or two, tell people how you wound up here at Church Militant, just so they know.
Very quickly, I was fired for being too Catholic. I was a Catholic teacher at a Catholic school, ostensibly, and I was just a little too Catholic. I quoted a saint, and they fired me, and Church Militant picked me up. I was a free agent.
It's a free agent. Our blessing, of course, the school's lost, but the school probably didn't deserve you to begin with. All right, is the United States going to face a demographic crisis? We've got low birth rates owing to contraception, abortion, pornography, the breakdown of the family, and so on. But first, we're going to be talking with one of our reporters, the esteemed Dr. William Mahoney. He's very esteemed. He doesn't like it when we say that, but he's very esteemed. He's going to be talking to us about the Theodore McCarrick case being filed in Wisconsin about sexual assault involving the former cardinal. Not that anybody could believe any of that. Hey, William, tell us more about this latest charge against the notorious homo predator.
He's now facing a criminal charge in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's now the second state to charge him with that. He's also been charged in Massachusetts for this one in Wisconsin happened in Lake Geneva when he was there in April of 1977. The victim, who was unnamed, was an 11-year-old boy at the time, and apparently the abuse was repetitive.
Hey, William, he was actually 18 at the time. 11 was the Massachusetts charge.
Sorry? Sorry, I got the ages mixed up. Okay,
right.
Sorry.
Yeah, just to make sure it's the audience. It happens, there's a bunch of numbers and stuff.
Yeah. There's so many. It's hard to keep up with.
We're happy to inform folks because obviously we did an interview with James Grine back in, I think it was 2019. Is that right?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, about 2019. And he actually told us about this case. He is the complaining witness, actually, in this case, the man who says this is what happened to him at the hands of McCarrick. He also revealed in that interview that Cardinal Bernardine of Chicago was also there, and both of them were involved in this sexual assault there in his late teen years. One of the things that we hear about the statute of limitations is that's how this was able to be filed. The case is from 1977. But as states continue to roll back these statutes of limitations, William, and they open up the window, so to speak, we're going to be seeing a lot, not necessarily McCarrick, although we probably should, but we're going to see a lot more of these types of things coming. I mean, they're forcing bankruptcies all over the place. But interesting, this is a criminal charge.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen this. A great precedent is New York, which rolled back they call it their look-back window, and they rolled that back, and look how many of the dioceses in New York went bankrupt as a result, like Rockville Center, so that we saw it really hurt them. Yes, this is rolling back also of criminal charge, not just civil charges as well. So this could actually come with a criminal sentence too.
The case in Massachusetts that he's in, his defense attorneys in that case filed a motion with the court to just dismiss the charges because he's old and senile and crippled and he's just like all broken down. They probably wouldn't expect him to even serve any time, even if he was found guilty. But what do you think of that in the case, specifically of the case of, Cardinal McCarrick, Theodore McCarrick? Yes, he has to face God and all that sort of thing. But talking about here on earth for justice for the victims, in this case, James Grine, but many others as well. Should courts be dismissing cases against guys just because they're really old?
I personally don't think so. I remember a conversation I had with one of my sisters when Trump was running back, and they were saying lock her up with Hillary, and my sister was saying to me, well, Hillary's so old, and like, what's the point? I thought, man, I'd drag her out of a nursing home and put her on trial. I don't, you did what you did, and you broke the law. It's cut and dried, and you need to face the consequences. As far as McCarrick, for the incredible amount of damage he's done to the victims like James Grind and to the church at large, I'm going to go full Formosus here, like, the cadaver trial. Like, even if you have to dig up the bones and put them on trial, I think that's completely just. And it's also for everyone in the church, but it's also for him. It's a huge wake-up call that he is about to face God. And, if you get a little justice in this life, hopefully it'll be easier for you in the next.
Yeah, that's a very good point. As you look around this whole thing, the network of high-ranking clerics here in the United States, not to mention the Vatican, that essentially came to his defense with their silence. We remember Donald Wuerl rushing to the cameras. Oh, this was decades and decades ago. No, this doesn't happen. And Kevin Farrell. Oh, I was shocked, and just on and on. That do you think that the USCCB, the Bishops' Conference, gives a hoot about any of this? Because you get to criminal proceedings, and all kinds of stuff can come falling out of the woodwork at that point.
It doesn't seem. I think they care in as much as how much pulling on this particular thread of the sweater is going to unravel whatever else they have going on. I think they care in that sense. Like, remember when Monsignor Grinder came out, the concern, some of the articles that were coming out about that on like America and these other wackadoodle dissident magazines was not, oh, this guy got caught, but it was almost like, what do we know about how he got caught? Because it seems like they're more concerned about not getting caught again than anything else. So I think they care in as much as it's going to affect their bottom line, but they don't seem to care as far as justice and equity and everything else.
It does raise the interesting question. It does raise the interesting question about just how corrupt could things have been for this to have gone on this many decades. This is 1977. And of course, we know 30 years later, the bishops are lying, or 25 years later, whatever, the bishops are lying, in 2002 at the, no, we're going to fix everything. In 2018, the McCarrick stuff was, the Dallas Charter was essentially written by McCarrick to protect largely himself and then all his other gay buddy bishops. So when you're looking at that play out here, do you think there's any realistic hope or even expectation that any of this is going to clean up?
I don't have hope in the hierarchy. They clearly can't police themselves. They've made that abundantly clear, and that's from the top down. So I think there's hope in as much as, like Venerable Fulton Sheen said, but it has to come from the laity now. That's what I think.
Yeah, William, you were with us in 2018, the Summer of Shame, and we were all kind of gearing up for...
Actually, I came right after that.
What month did you actually come there?
I came in 2019.
2019. Okay, well,
right after the Summer of Shame.
2018, we had the bishops on the run. Basically, the USCCB was going to do the right thing. They wanted to bring out who knows what about McCarrick's rise to power. In November, they got shut down by the Vatican. And then they have a sham summit, sex summit in February with Zupich at the helm there.
For 2.5 days.
For 2.5 days, because they said, oh, don't worry, we're going to cover all this in Rome. I mean, with the bishops actually thinking about doing the right thing, what's your take on the fact that the Vatican itself said, hey, we need to pump the brakes on this, we'll take care of it in Rome, and then didn't?
I mean, at that point, they've turned the mechanisms and structures of the church into an international crime syndicate. I mean, I don't know any other way to see it. That's what they've done with it at that point. You now have, they actually want to do things on the local level. The church is always touting subsidiarity, which is that you deal with things on the local level. So as soon as the United States was ready to do that, they were poised to do that, and the Vatican steps in and says no. They're stepping on their own principles in favor of what appears to be some sort of international crime syndicate.
Now, Dr. Mahoney, I know we said the particular charges here are fourth-degree sexual assault. Do we know exactly the details of really what that is in this particular case in Wisconsin?
Yeah, without going into great details, it usually involves, fondling genitals is usually what we're dealing with.
Yeah, the case here on this is the while James Grine, he's the victim, he's come out and said that publicly in an interview yesterday with a local Milwaukee TV station. So we're not breaking any confidence there. Plus, he gave us an interview in 2019 saying the whole thing. But he was wrapping up some form of naval station duty. McCarrick came and picked him up, took him to Lake Geneva, where Bernardine was there. And if I recall correctly, he said there were a number of other gay guys there, clergy there as well. They all went down, or a group of them went down to the end of the dock, hopped into the water, and McCarrick and Bernardine, one was in the front, one was in the back, and one of them pulled down his swimsuit, and they yeah, I mean, this is, these were two cardinal, well, McCarrick wasn't a cardinal at that point. Actually, neither was Bernardine, but they were still the movers and shakers in the church. They were building the case up for the hierarchy and the clergy to just solidify the whole gay thing in the church. And that they would feel that brazen to be able to do this just that openly is really astounding, William.
It's absolutely disgusting, really. It's sickening that they would do this to anybody.
B, an interesting thing to discuss, and of course, Bernardine is not an unknown name. It's a name that is widely known. It's a name that is known particularly for our audience as the individual who was the architect for communion in the hand, and in many ways, this wholesale deconstruction of the actual practice of the liturgy, and particularly in the United States. And of course, we have, Case File Season 2 is discussing that whole thing. Do you think, that there's actually some kind of connection here between the moral malfeasance of these clerics and their decision to promote things such as communion in the hand, such as the change of the liturgy and all these kind of things? Do you feel that there's a connection there, or is that just pure coincidence?
Well, if it's a coincidence, it's an absolutely stunning one. I can't see how you couldn't, you fought me once, maybe it's a coincidence. You fought me twice. What's going on? You fought me 3 times. This is an action of the enemy at this point. This is calculated. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it as a whole, the circumstantial evidence really stacks up and is pretty overwhelming. So it seems to me there's definitely a connection between wanting to destroy the liturgy, which is really just to destroy the faith. I mean, that's the idea behind that. If you can get communion in the hands and everything else, people aren't going to believe in the real presence. And we've seen that happening. I mean, the polls show that. So I think, this is absolutely malicious and it's destructive, and it goes hand in hand with all the sexual perversions that these guys practice as well.
It's interesting, William, if you set the deadline or the timeline here. In 1977, Bernardine, I know we're talking about McCarrick, but I mean, these two go sort of hand in glove. I'll leave the analogy at that. They go hand in glove. While this was going on in Lake Geneva in 1977, Bernardine was president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, and at the same time was trying to manufacture the votes to get communion in the hand approved by the Bishops' Conference. He never got that. He failed 3 votes in a row. All 3 years he was president, he tried to put it through, and he lost all 3. And then at the end, he manufactured what is essentially a fraudulent vote by expanding the pool of bishops in violation of the USCCB's own rules, expanding the pool of bishops, and going around getting essentially deathbed votes from guys who are 400 years old lying in a nursing home. And he comes back and goes, "Oh, look, we found sufficient votes." Kind of sounds like I'm not going to say anything.
This is covered great in Reception Deception on the Eucharist Sleight of Hand, which did some time. I'm reworking some of that content for a new show we're doing on the Eucharist, which is going to incorporate that. But it's excellent to watch that, and I think Simon said it was in the Case Files as well. That's exactly what they did. They just kept manipulating and cheating and lying and stealing until they finally got what they wanted. I won't say maybe that we've seen that in other places, maybe.
Can't have the slightest idea what you're possibly alluding to.
Right.
But William, thank you very much for all the insights and the opinions, as usual. Dr.
Welcome.
William Mahoney, esteemed. Can I call you esteemed? I never call you that here at the studio, but I'll say it for the audience.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, William. We'll see you later. God bless. And now on to our main topic for this episode, the demographic decline. The U.S. birth rate, though varying a lot year to year, has often fallen below the replacement rate since the 1970s. People are conceived and they're born, then people die. The replacement rate is when there's enough babies being born to sustain the population at its current level. Births are replacing deaths. It's generally held as about 2.0 to 2.1 births per woman in the United States. The birth rate started dipping below that in the 1970s. The past 5 years or so, it's hovered around 1.7 or 1.8 births per woman, significantly below what again is considered normal and healthy. Actually, more people are dying than are being born. That causes a net decrease. What are the causes of this and what might be its long-term side effects? Well, guys, you've covered some of the things in abortion and everything, but you drop below your replacement rate, and the social scientists will call it the triangle. If the triangle is inverted, meaning it's top heavy with older people, and as you go down, there's fewer and fewer younger people. Well, the burden becomes greater on that upside down triangle to sustain those people at the top, and we're starting to see that. I mean, there's now talking again about Social Security gone and this and that.
Well, I think you can talk about what is going to happen in the United States by looking at what is happening in certain places. So, for example, they set fire to Paris, which normally, obviously,
Don't make a British joke about Paris burning.
There are no jokes about Paris being burning, but obviously, Paris is burning because the French have set fire to it. Why did the French set fire to it? The French set fire to it because there is a plan to raise the retirement age from like 62 to 65 or something like that. I mean, you actually tell it to an American who's like, dude, I'm working until I'm 70 or whatever because whatever. But why is there a necessity to raise this retirement age? Because there are not enough younger people who are working, paying into the system, because there are so many older people drawing on these pensions and so forth that they're having there. So, yeah, are we going to see, for example, people marching on Washington and setting fire to it? Well, possibly not, but are we going to see that same sort of unrest, the same kind of political movement to say, keep your hands off my Social Security? They're talking about Social Security being insolvent in 5 years, 5, 6 years, whatever. You can shuffle it around a bit. Obviously, a lot of that is because people have dipped into it. They've slapped IOUs in the fund, et cetera, but a lot of it as well is people are living longer, and there are not enough people in the lower cohorts, the younger cohorts, to be working. We see this other situation happening in Japan, which has a hugely inverted situation. What we're seeing there, not so much a lot of rioting and complaining and so forth, but the Japanese have started having to really leverage huge amounts of technology, very innovative, very clever, in order to deal with the social pressures, not the economic pressures, the social pressures of there not being children. So there's obviously a lot of pets and a lot of kind of digital artificial intelligence pets and all this sort of stuff, just to provide people with companionship. Even here, now, less and less people in the younger cohorts, less social interaction for the older people. They're not just using that Amazon Alexa and all of those things just to order their Mucinex or their adult diapers or whatever you might need because these are older people or whatever you want. They're using them actually just to chat with, to go back and forth, because there's not enough human interaction.
Well, and here's another point that I think is worth bearing if you guys want to jump in. Is there one of the things that France and many European countries are doing, specifically because of the replacement rate issue, is they've set about a policy of immigration from not Italy, it's got its own problem, not Germany, got its own problem, but from the Middle East. And you're having that clash of cultures over there now, that there is no assimilation. And if you're bringing these folks in to work, to, charge taxes against their income and that sort of thing to sort of sustain the system, it ain't working. And you've imported a whole heck of a lot of problems culturally.
Oh, yeah, we bring people in from across the border here in Mexico and South America, and they're bringing them in from the Middle East. And both areas, it's a tremendous burden on the local systems that you have at the time. So it's not actually helping there, although I think some people are trying to say, well, they're adding to the lower base. and that's going to be filling up a void there. But in the process, you're doing it in such a clunky way that all these people get their green cards and all their endowments that they entitlements that are coming across, that you can't sustain all that. So
they spend $2 billion a year on educating illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. School.
Yeah, that's just one area.
$2 billion a year. Where's that money coming from?
Yeah.
The thing is, we can't rely on immigration, though. Even if we're trying to offset it with immigration, it's just that. It's an offset.
Right.
Where do you get your base of younger people? It's from the birth rates of the families in your countries, not flooding people across the border and all the problems that entails.
We can roll this back. There's been false prophets in this whole scenario here. And there was one of the great false prophets was Paul Ehrlich in 1968, all the way back in 68. He wrote The Population Bomb. And well, that kind of fizzled, right? Because
it was a dud.
It was very much of a dud. Because of the fact that there was this nobody's having babies anymore, right? So what Ehrlich was saying was that, millions are going to be starving because population is going to outpace farming, agriculture. He's a biologist. I guess he wasn't a mathematician very well because he talked about the population.
Should be able to work a calculator.
Population growing linearly and actually farming going down, exponentially. The exponentially on the
population.
Linear growth on the agriculture. So he wasn't even good at those numbers whatsoever. But the false prophecies that he made, England would be disappearing by 2000. American lifespan would drop to 42 years old. You're statistically dead by now.
I would be dead.
We'd be dead.
And that was just by 19.
We'll all be dead.
I'm all decomposed.
That was by 1980. Okay, 1980. And by 2000, England's gone. Millions are starving. So the whole idea was that he missed on several aspects here. One, the birth rate, as we see, people, because they're contracepting couples, they're not having kids. Because of the fact that you have marriage and family are just in complete free fall right now. So no one's getting married and having families and all these. And who has the large families? You're talking exponential growth. You're talking maybe Amish community or Middle Eastern community or something. But the communities out there who are worried about, tripping the life fantastic out there, we're not talking about having kids. We're just running around having fun.
Vacation homes. Yachts.
Well, it's very interesting. Ehrlich's a really kind of interesting guy because you say that he wasn't a mathematician, and I think that he was probably actually doing a lot of math. And you can
poorly.
Well, he was probably doing it really, really well. It's just that the equations he's using are flawed. So it's like the whole thing. You come along and you have your story problem in math, and it's like Bob buys 7 apples and then he sells 16 and he does all this. Anyway, you have a story problem, and the first thing you do with the story problem is let's make sense of this and let's actually produce an equation so that I can come to an answer. Plug some stuff in. What assumptions am I plugging in? Ehrlich's problem, I think, is that he was not a historian. So you come along and he's saying, okay, so I feel that, population growth is exponential. Well, yes. If you've got 100 people and a generation later, well, they've doubled, and then that's more and more, it's more couples, and okay, population growth is exponential. But the notion of saying agriculture is going to be linear, it's like, are you not aware of Jethro Tull? I do not mean the hard rockers from the United Kingdom, but the chap they were named after, Jethro Tull, inventor of the seed drill, which allowed for the more efficient planting of things. Are you not aware of the advances in fertilization, in crop rotation, all these things that were done during the agricultural revolution that occurred simultaneously with the industrial revolution? Are you not aware of the fact that human ingenuity for tens of thousands of years has solved these problems?
Well, just look at the tractor in 1968 and the tractor in 2023 and how much implement you're pulling at one time.
And all of these things.
You drive past some of these fields that, it's like, wow, look at the technology out there. I'm not talking about the GMO stuff. I'm talking about, the irrigation systems that they've got building in areas that, it's just phenomenal to watch it. Necessity is the mother of invention. If you need to somehow have the earth, do something to the earth to make it produce more food through better technology and planting and all of this, you're going to do it because you're not going to let your civilization starve to death.
There was that big area down in Arizona. I was down visiting my parents down there, and it was just a complete desert, 40 years ago. And because of irrigation, it just became an explosion of agriculture.
And another thing, and this is kind of the horrible thing that you've sort of got to go with, that Ehrlich's kind of presumption was that there would come a point when it's like we've got too many people trying to eat too little food. And it's like, okay, so you're going to have mass deaths that will be caused by starvation, or population pressure is going to lead to war, it's going to lead to invasion, it's going to lead to all of these deaths and things. And he then just kind of assumed, well, that's just going to carry on. You know what? It's not. if you've got like enough food,
wars of
they stop.
Yeah, they
stop once the resources are level.
Once you've got what you want, it comes to an end. You're just in a state of perpetual war.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And so it would have been brutal and horrible, but it would not have been like, the destruction of entire countries and this sort of thing.
But that's the whole MO of these doomsday prophet guys, the guys that we worship in the scientific community or whatever, in the social economic predictors, is that they're trying to look at things in the future, which is really hard to predict. All they can get is a best guess scenario some of these times. And, we mentioned, the used to be fact of having large families, right? And the unfortunate thing is that with comments like that, you see a large family now and people assume what? Oh, they're Mormons. They're Muslims, which in fact tends to be true, unfortunately. But it used to be that you would look at a family like that and say, oh, they must be Catholic.
Right.
That's not true anymore.
That hasn't happened in probably 30 years.
Yeah, unless you're going to, traditional Catholic communities, 5, 10 kids, some of these places, but that's not your normal parish on Sunday.
Oh, absolutely not. The contracepting boomers, that was just legendary. So the question for me really is, who is actually pushing the narrative? And, you have the nutty scientists. Okay, so you get the Paul Ehrlich out there. You have people such as the tree huggers, who I think are just being instrumentalized in all this. They just love nature, and if we just get off the planet, it'll be a better place.
Yeah, it'd be a much better place for the trees if the humans weren't here. That's actually true, I guess, if you're from a tree's perspective.
It's almost a pantheistic pantheistic notion that the world, the Pachamama type, tree huggers out there, that the world itself is just this living organism that we have to love and protect.
It needs to be saved.
Right?
Did Christ die for the trees? He died on a tree.
Or, and the other people being instrumentalized in all this is the contracepting couples.
Sure.
Very, very selfish, wanting, I want 1.2 children and a dog and maybe a TV set or 2 or 3. Or whatever. And the thing is, it's a good narrative for them, right? So, but can any of those people finance, coordinate, instrumentalize, weaponize pseudoscience to the degree which you can push a false narrative globally and make it sell to come up with this type of thing?
I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to make it sell. All you do, is, again, media is my bag. All you do is just keep putting images out there.
But who is doing that in a coordinated fashion?
Your global reset people.
Okay,
your global reset people.
Now, that's where we're going here.
Yeah.
The globalists.
Absolutely.
Now we get to
What do you do when you have so much money it would be impossible to spend it in 5 lifetimes?
Okay.
You just can't keep flying around to Paris for breakfast and Istanbul for lunch and Kremlin.
Fire.
You just can't do it.
Bill Gates.
You can't do it. You
George
get
Soros,
bored with it. So what do? There's only one thing left to cling to, and that's world power.
There you
I
go.
want to run the world.
There you go. Now you got an MO.
99.99999% of the people cannot identify with that.
Absolutely.
The same way most of us couldn't identify anything about being a serial killer. The thought never even enters your head. Well, if you're a Democrat at a national convention, maybe it does. But anyway, so you're doing all this, and what? Because you've got nothing else to do.
That's your thing.
Right. That's your thing. So you set about to run the world. I mean, we've had history, Stalin, Hitler, Mao Zedong, and back to, wherever. There's always been some crazy who thinks he wants to run the world. But these guys do, and they have the power to do it. The other guys didn't. They didn't have the power to do it.
Everybody else is either being weaponized, instrumentalized, patsies along the way, being caught up in the entourage of it all. You get the pseudoscientist Ehrlich. He probably learned that stuff in college, They take over the institute.
Yeah, he wrote his book at Stanford.
Okay. So, as a biologist at Stanford, but he's
still on TV.
But
he's still on media pushing
They're still
this.
citing him like he's valid science.
Like it's a valid
he's not.
science.
He's been debunked ad nauseum.
Yeah. Well, I think he's just simply debunked by the fact that he made predictions and it didn't happen. I mean, look, if
the opposite.
That's a false prophet by definition.
Yeah. If you want to go out and be a prophet and you want to say, look, the world is going to end or something is going to happen, pick a date when you're dead. Or at least when the checks will have cashed, and don't keep doing that. I think I would kind of take a bit of a different angle from you two on this whole thing, that while I agree that there are a small number of people obviously have that kind of desire, I think the the fundamental consumerist late capitalist appeal of you can have the second car, you can have the house in the Hamptons, you can just simply not have to worry about having too much month at the end of your money, as they say, because you've got a kid. And there's so many of these people who are not having children. It's not, well, I never wanted to have children, I didn't. It's like, well, you know, we just never got round to it because I wanted to get my career settled, or I wanted to finish my degree, or we needed to make sure that we had enough money.
Yeah, they weren't anti-children. They were just third, fourth, fifth on the priority
list. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so they were really like selfish, kind of pro stuff. You know, they wanted stuff. They wanted things. You know, he who dies with the most toys wins, kind of thing.
That's where my 5-year-old's at right now.
Right, which is fine when you're 5.
That's perfect.
But when I was a child, I thought as a child, and then I put away childish things, and I think a lot of
decided to run the world.
Hopefully he doesn't make that turn.
A lot of these people didn't. So what you have is you have all of this stuff feeding into this idea of, well, it's okay not to have kids, and it doesn't take much to reduce the average number of children that somebody's having from like 2 point something to 1 point something, which is where we are now, and this is where it is. And then it becomes a self-sustaining reaction because society has been set up for families with like 1 or 2, maybe 3 children. It's been set up with that. So now you go and try to buy a car. What are your options? You can have a nice car that can fit you and your wife and maybe some groceries and there's
your 1.3 children.
And your 1.3 children. Or you can have this great hulking, really not terribly attractive, you know, passenger van thing.
Small school bus.
Small school bus.
The trad van, which is tremendously practical, but it's like, is that, where are the great adverts for It's
this?
not sexy.
It's not sexy.
I don't want that rusted out thing.
Exactly, and this is.
And guys don't want to drive that.
No, guys don't want to drive that.
Guys want to drive
But
that
why?
sports car.
But why don't guys want to drive that? Guys don't want to.
Because they want to drive the sports car.
And because the entire media thing has been set up not necessarily to push an agenda, but to match the agenda.
The cool guy never shows up in a trad van.
No,
at the crime scene or at the bank robbery. You never see Speed driving trad vans.
you push the angle, though, about the selfishness, and that's true. There's a lot of that. But it almost was switched. In 1968 and before, we were trying to Christianize the world, missionary work, you know, and take it to the four corners. The idea then, all of a sudden, it almost became an ethos that you have to work towards global sustainment, depopulation. It was really in the mind, like if you had 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 kids, you're kind of an enemy of the world in the mentality. That was a narrative that was out there. So it wasn't just, I want to be, yes, there is that thing. I want to be selfish and live my own selfish lifestyle. But there was almost a shared responsibility that was marketed to the people.
That was kind of the indulgent soul to them, to use the tutzel and all of that sort of stuff. It was the idea of, well, you can be selfish. You can die with the most toys, but your toys will be environmentally sustainable. And so, yes, you will.
But you have a shared responsibility to help your family numbers stay
there's
low.
absolute social pressure. You know, you get the look at.
I heard that from people in that era. That they were saying we were looked down on.
That happens now.
Oh yeah,
that happens now. You show up, you go to the supermarket with 5 children. Like, oh, what? Maybe somebody won't come up to you and say something, but you get the looks.
Yeah, you get the looks. Yeah.
I was gonna say it's almost as the original virtue signaling is being environmentally friendly and all that. That's how I was raised as a kid who grew up in the '90s watching '90s cartoons. You know, they had the old school cartoons that you all grew up with, but they also had this one called Captain Planet.
I remember Captain Planet.
Remember Captain Planet? And it was showing kids how to save the environment, because you could be a superhero doing that, and that was the new virtue. That was really the only virtue. Do whatever you want, sexually. Don't practice religion, but as long as you're recycling, you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
I wanted to go back to the globalist thing for a minute there, because there's an angle here I want to share with the audience before we check out today.
And by the way, I think just on the globalist and Simon's point to the lower base and the top base, both of those are at work.
Oh, absolutely. Both are facets of the
problem. You're playing to the lowest common denominator of people. I want stuff, and you got people up there going, give them stuff, so they don't have kids.
And because you have 7 capital sins out there, and the devil plays the tune, so everybody has their own thing. Pride, I just want to run the world, power and that type of thing. People out there with lust and my own greed and that type of thing, I just want to pander to that. But if you take the globalists for a minute and you actually are saying, okay, they're the bishops and the rooks on the chess table. Well, is there some hand that's actually moving out there? And I would like to take it back to what Church Militant has talked about on different occasions. There is, in my estimation, only one conspiracy theory, and it goes back to Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between the woman and your seed, talking to the serpent. And I really think that conspiracy that's been playing out from time immemorial, from the time Adam and Eve were there, because we know in the garden that wasn't a myth, regardless of what Raymond Brown might say. And the fact is,
I believe Bishop Barron may have actually said that.
Yeah, keep your private Catholicism yourself. Anyway, if you take that conspiracy theory, that's Catholic. It's Catholic dogma. Okay, sure. that conspiracy theory is going on. You take that, and he has his minions to do his bidding, and there are not a lot of them at the top that go ahead and run these strings in society. And there's these power moguls that, the Genghis Khan of the day, and Nero in his age, and there's always a person or two that's got a lot of power in life. So we have people out here, the globalists right now, and they have this ability, but the devil's behind it. They're actually still being played, and they don't really realize it, in the sense that Satan, Lucifer, has his song that he's playing. And what is he about? And there's really an interesting parallel here if you look at this. Satan wants to bring down the church. Who actually represents Christianity, or had in the past represented Christianity, was Western civilization. Western civilization then is target numero uno there, and I need to put the crosshairs on Western Civ, because it's not the Muslims, he's already kind of got, not the communist blocs, because they've already fallen. Reagan said this back in the day, there's only one thing between world domination, right? That's
us. Yeah.
So let's target Western civilization, and we can do it with climate change and all of these scenarios that go back along with that, depopulation and climate change, environmentalism, all that stuff is, we need to just lower the population level in the world. That typically is hitting the West, Japan, France, America, all
Sure, we're the rich countries.
Far more than India, Africa, and those areas. And China could care less about, going green. It's not their thing.
No, it is not China's thing to go green. Building on that point about the whole Genesis thing, it all looks good. That was the whole point. What does it say? It says, hey, look at that fruit over there. You can't eat this. And she looks at it and says, oh, and it was pleasing to behold. So you look at all of all the stuff going on here, and what are they doing? They're holding out in front of you. The globalists I'm talking about are holding out in front of people. It looks good. Once you've done that, once you've constructed that narrative, it's essentially game over. If the person isn't reinforced with supernatural grace, you're going to look at that. Heck, I mean, there wasn't even concupiscence, and Eve fell,
right.
And then she takes it over to Adam, and he's like, yum, yum, munch. And so, I mean, they were in a higher state than we are now, and they fell.
Right.
So you put this stuff in front of people, and they're like, oh, yeah. And you got to remember, what am I always preaching here? Always behind the scenes. It's every day, bam, 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 because that's how you get into people's minds. That's why I think all these movies and spend $10 billion making some cool movie. People go and watch it, and they walk outside after 2 hours. They may be moved by it, and they get hit with an ad. Something happens on the car radio. They turn on TV. They go on YouTube. Their phone lights up. And they're just inundated with it. You have to push back against the inundation, not the big giant presentation of the message. And it just looks too attractive, because it is attractive, because we're fallen, and that's the point. And if you can't talk on that level, which you're not allowed to talk on today, you're really not, then it really is game over. Why would you have more children? Think about the idiocy of this. Johnson & Johnson, one of their largest divisions is diapers and baby care and infant formula and all that stuff and everything. At the same time, they are one of the largest supporters and donors to Planned Parenthood. You're killing your own future customers. You're contributing to your shrinking market. Why? Because you're just ideologically driven. I mean, it's the same thing with Bud Light and Mulvaney, all of it. You care more about your ideology. Why? I mean, look, they lost, Bud Light, $6 billion.
Oh, it's up to 6 now.
I was going to say it's up to there.
It was 5 the last time I looked.
Which represents 5% of their capitalization.
Really?
That's still a lot of money, and that's still
It's a lot of money, but when corporations look at the margins and look at the dollars. They look at the margins. They will look at the dollars if it gets down that low. You've lost $6 billion, and it's 5% of your capitalization, your global capitalization. I mean, that's nothing to them, really. Why haven't they retracted? Why haven't they said, oh, we made a mistake? Because they don't care. Because they're willing to sacrifice 5, 6, 8, probably up to 20%. They're not going to lose $40 billion over this.
Well, I think, to be honest, I mean, this is tangential to the whole issue of, population control and decline and so forth. But
but these are some of the driving forces behind it.
I think the Bud Light thing, and this is kind of like for any. Right now, in every single corporate boardroom, the discussion going on is like, guys, is it safe to touch the transgender thing? Is it safe to step into it? Because Bud stepped into that accidentally with some lower level person, whatever. They stepped into it. You can't step out without getting it in the neck again. It's like, okay, I've just upset a whole bunch of my base, and they're very upset to the tune of $6 billion. If I step out at this point and go, oh, this was a mistake, all of the people who support trans, oh, so you don't support trans, yeah, I mean, it couldn't be happening to a nicer company. I
was reading an article earlier this morning on, I think Associated Press, can't remember, that however they do that and measure all these different markets, sales are down in bars in certain areas of the country 40%. They're not ordering Bud Light at the bars. They made the contrast that in one particular area of gay bars in New York City, I mean, you'd think they'd be like, yeah, give me 4 more of them. No, they're off by 70%. 70% Bud Light sales are down in gay bars in New York City, at least the area they surveyed, however they do that.
The L and the G do not like the T.
There's a lot of tension there.
They lose the T. Yeah, the LG thinks that thinks that that's an encroachment on their hard-won rights. Yeah. It's quite amazing. But look, it's all of these crazy things that are used in order by Satan to reduce the population. Satan hates humanity. He hates humanity, hates all of it. He's in hell because of a vision of us presented to him that he rejected in the Savior. So all of these things have at their root, look at every single one of these little bricks in the wall. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. Contraception, abortion, this, that, save the planet. But every single one of them is designed to make you be pushed to the margin as a faithful, believing, virtuous person. That's the point.
I think there's something more fundamental and kind of deeper on your conspiracy theory that I want to go with. And you touched on it when we said Satan hates humanity. Yes, Satan hates humanity, but what does he hate more than humanity in the abstract? It's not just individual people that he hates more. He hates the very concept of human flesh. He hates the very concept of incarnation. So the entire foundation of the salvation of the human race is the incarnation of Christ in human flesh. And the entire method by which we are damned, we commit sins in our flesh. The sin of our first parents is not merely some intellectual thing. It is an actual physical, real sin of eating the fruit. The virtuous acts that we perform, acts of charity, the acts of corporal works of mercy, they are physical acts. The sacraments are not, as the Protestants would want to say, some Gnostic, merely spiritual thing. No, it's wine and oil and bread and water. It's things that we do. The whole thing is it's like even with the sense of like when you're praying the rosary, you have rosary beads that you do with your hands. Satan hates human flesh. I'm a huge fan of C.S. Lewis, who was not Catholic, but kind of awfully close to it, and has a great kind of Catholic sensibility in this. Lewis talks about this notion of the reduction of humanity in the final book of the Cosmic Trilogy, That Hideous Strength. What he actually presents it, though, he presents it in a totally different way to the way it's playing out now in the real world. He presents it as anti-environmentalism, this destruction of all of the biological. We will cut all of nature down so that humanity will collapse. We will get rid of as much human flesh as possible, because Lewis saw it. That's what Satan wants to do. He wants to get rid of human flesh. It isn't just a case, let's bring down the church and bring down Western civilization, and I don't like these people. It is the mechanism for salvation that he wants to get rid of.
Well, that's
I think
exactly right.
the
The
thing.
mechanism of salvation is the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is rooted, has been expressed in Western civilization more than any other part of the globe. So when you bring down the West, you're actually also bringing down the church itself, and that's a big target. The globalists aren't just working from pride, they're also working from avarice. The big financiers can go ahead, and even the middle financiers, they invested in China and India and all the industry around, and then you can go ahead and collapse your own companies here because everything is over there, and that's a big problem. But before we get to the end of the show, too, I wanted to wade in with Kyle here. As a father, as someone who's having to push back from this whole narrative of, you need to save the planet, dude, and you're not doing it. You're having kids. You're having a family. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit,
Pretty selfish.
It is, but I throw a couple cans in the recycling bin every once in a while to kind of offset
Kind of a token to the Pachamama and all that.
Exactly. Well, I think myself, and this is not to toot my own horn, but myself and many other young, traditional, faithful Catholics out there have taken up that it's really a clarion call for families to have more children. I mean, this is one of the elements.
You're actually
of
the enemy of the state right now. You know that.
Exactly. I'm a criminal, but our Lord was treated as a criminal as well. So that's how we have to live. Unfortunately, we're butting up against the secular forces. But yeah, taking up this mantle really involves realizing what the goal, one of the virtues, the aspects of the marital vocation is. What, right? It's procreative. So to compound those excuses, like Simon was saying, families will be like, oh, well, we're just going to wait a couple more years. Do we need another child? There's always going to be an excuse not to have another child. Where does your faith lie in all that? Is God going to take care of you if you have another child? Yes, he will. If you are a faithful person, he will. He'll make it work. I mean, we've seen miraculous things happen. I'm just talking to another father in the studio today, and it seems like, I don't want to get all Joel Osteen here with prosperity gospel, but no, it seems that if you're living out your faith correctly, if you're procreating, if you're being unitive with your wife, God will take care of you in those circumstances that arise.
And also it's another question, do you want to have another young'un in the crib who's going to be crying all night, and you have to have your wife get up all night long to take care of the kid every time he cries? I care about my wife, so that's a consideration that.
Well, and you care so much, you say, get up, honey.
And the fact that she's willing to do that, and
I think the care is going the other way, Brad.
I would actually come at this from like the perspective of somebody who doesn't have children. My wife and I, we can't have children, and so we don't have kids, and we're obviously getting older. This happens to everyone at the rate of 24 hours every day. You get older, one year every 365 days, and the whole question is, who is going to take care of me? Because my plan is to be gloriously martyred and appear in the breviary with some appropriate epithet. But that's probably not a solid.
Probably not going to happen.
No, it's probably not going to happen. But because I'm not that fortunate in many ways. But it's like, so I've got this long, slow martyrdom of the decay of the body, which is what's given to like 90, 95, 100, almost 100% of people. But the question is, well, who's going to take care of me? Because I don't have children. I don't have children to take care of me. I don't have the option of grandchildren to take care of me. So there's I've obviously got family friends, and I've got my godchildren and these sort of things, and obviously the hope is that they would be there. But it's a very real sense. It's like, who's going to be taking care of me in my dotage at that point, or just when I get to a point and it's like, okay, I've finished work here and I'm done and I'm retired. What's my life going to be?
I've seen Catholic families who are taking care of their own, who actually would take grandma into the household.
Yep.
And take
That's how
care
it used
of her.
to be.
I'm telling you, that was so beautiful.
Yep.
To see, and that I can just picture this one grandmother and the smile and the beauty and the happiness there, being surrounded by loved ones who really care about you and how are you doing, comfort, and she can just see her grandkids all around and everything, up until the final years of her life and everything. And they all felt very privileged to have her there. And also the same concept, just going back to the convents, they say that what's the room where you take care of all of the invalids in the convent? I'm going to have that word in a minute. Infirmary. Anyway, the infirmary, and that was by the good mother superiors would say that was the most important room in the house. That's where most of the sacrificial redemptive suffering is taking place, and the prayers are coming from, the powerhouse of the place. That is what God wanted for us. And we, in our selfishness, like you're saying, all of us being selfish, want to, take shortcuts, and our selfishness and the globalists pushing and all this type of stuff, and we're following the lead, are shortcutting that. Here and now, we always get this idea that, suffer now and just tough it up and it'll be good for you in heaven someday. Trust me. God wants us to be happy here and now. And that plan he had for us here and now would have made us, can make us happy if we follow that. And it's a sad thing that we don't in so many levels.
Yeah, it really is. I have to say, when I was, I think many of our viewers know that my father lived with me for the last 12 years of his life. Not because he was sick or ailing or anything, but, towards the end, the last few months, he'd had a heart attack and eventually pneumonia set in. But during that whole many months period, about 5 or 6 months, I was taking care of him much more than I had been before. And I got to make his dinners and, little Tupperware things and whatever. And he loved my mashed potatoes. And and you get to do that, and it really is. It's sad and everything, thinking about him being gone and all that. That's not the point of it. But you look and you're like, well, this is a thing that this is the way it should be. That and there's even scriptural Old Testament support for that. Fathers, sons who essentially take care of their fathers. You wipe out a multitude of sins, and some of us have a multitude of sins to wipe out. And and it's this beautiful. It really is this beautiful thing. It's not just a replacement on numbers, which it is. Excuse me. It's not just that. It's how are you replacing the spiritual benefits of being able to participate in that kind of activity? The
wisdom that your father had to share with you at the end of his life?
Yeah. You lose all of that. So you're not just, the replacement rate isn't just make sure that you got 2.1 children or more just so the numbers stay even. If you have 2.4, you have a thriving society or culture. It's also all the spiritual aspect of this. Most importantly, it's the spiritual aspect of all of it. And none of that gets taken into account in any of these kinds of conversations, passing on the wisdom, even among atheists. The old people have some wisdom. They've lived, 70, 80, 90 years. They've got something to pass on, even if it's just natural virtue. Their children are deprived of that. Yeah. Think about even on a Catholic level where you've got supernatural wisdom and strength, and that doesn't get passed on because you've just abandoned the entire structure that God created for us to be able to live this way.
Yeah, most cultures did have a reverence for their elders.
Absolutely.
Well, I think this is far too big a topic to handle in the last 2 minutes of the show, but this is a topic that would make actually for a great whole show itself.
Yeah.
The deconstruction of the family structure, and not just the sense of, mommy and daddy who are married and have children, not just that, but the wider family structure of taking care of older relatives and not slaughtering children with Down syndrome, all of that, the cause of that as the growth of the welfare state. I think because when you actually look at it, this notion, you talk about Social Security being insolvent. Well, Social Security is only needed because there are not families who are willing to support their families. Why am I being taxed to pay for my Social Security in theory when it kind of should be that, I would have children to support me and families to support me?
Yeah, the original social safety net was society, was particularly the family and also the parish too.
Yeah.
And nowadays, what are
see that is a great discussion.
All government now.
Yeah, it's the evil of the government social welfare net and everything that it's done. If you wanted
to destroyed families,
it's destroyed families, particularly. Again, far too big to deal with in the last 30 seconds. The black family. Absolutely messed them up.
Yeah, one is, I remember as a kid, particularly being in the military, traveling around with loads of, black friends on Air Force bases and things like that. That was one of the most, they needed to become Catholic, but that was one of the most spiritual communities, everything. And I even noticed to today, if I'm like in a store someplace and the checkout clerk is African American, I'll say, okay, thanks very much, God bless. Almost to a person, they always say God bless back. A white guy, white woman, almost never says it. They're like, thank you.
They don't know how to deal with it.
They don't even know how to deal with it. So, it is, the government has destroyed that family and all of the spirituality that went along with it. It's really quite awful. Well, so much we get for listening to Paul Ehrlich for all these years.
Right.
Thanks very much for joining us for this episode of our new download. Not so new anymore, actually. This is our second week, third week.
I lost count.
Yeah, lots of time. So we wrap up, as we always do here, with a prayer to Our Lady, begging for her intercession for our nation and the church. Please join us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus exules filiae Eve. Ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes in hac lacrimarum vale. Ei ergo advocata nostra, ilos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte. Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you again for joining us for the Download, new and improved Download. We're going to be premiering a new episode just like this every weekday, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. So from all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.